The morning mist enveloped the peaks of the Rocky Mountains like an ancestral shroud when Robert Mitchell, 42, and his daughter Julia, only 12, began what would be their final expedition together. The retired geologist from ExxonMobil had meticulously planned that adventure, 3 weeks exploring the oldest rock formations in Colorado, a birthday gift for the daughter who had inherited his passion for the wilderness. In the small town of Crested Butte, near the Colorado-Utah border, the last reports described them buying supplies at Martha's General Store. The shopkeeper, now 73, still holds in her memory the image of Julia leafing through a sketch notebook, her brown eyes sparkling with anticipation while her father checked GPS coordinates on a worn topographic map. She asked me if I knew plants that only grow at high altitude, remembers Martha, her hands trembling as she serves coffee in enamel cups. Robert said they were going to look for rare alpine flowers on Mount Elbert. He said it would be the adventure of her lifetime. The last official communication came via amateur radio 3 days later at 6:47 p.m. on a rainy Thursday. Robert's voice, distorted by static, reported adverse weather conditions and the decision to establish base camp at 7,200 feet elevation at coordinates 39°0704 N, 106°2644 W. His final words, recorded by the operator at the Colorado Search and Rescue in Leadville, carried a strange urgency. Julia found something interesting. We're going to investigate in the morning. The silence that followed would last 13 years. In the following 72 hours, while the emergency protocol unfolded with the bureaucratic precision typical of announced tragedies, the Rocky Mountains transformed into an impenetrable fortress. Torrential rains, dense fog that reduced visibility to less than 5 meters, and winds up to 50 mph converted the region into a deadly labyrinth. The first rescue teams, composed of firefighters from Colorado and military personnel from the Mountain Warfare Training Center, managed to locate the abandoned campsite 5 days after the last contact. Intact tents, organized equipment, sealed food, everything suggested a planned and temporary departure. Only 2 details disrupted the apparent order. Julia's sketch notebook was open to a blank page, and Robert's GPS recorded a trail of 2,780 feet toward an uncatalogued rock formation. For 3 weeks, 127 people scoured every rock, every crevice, every possible natural shelter within a 9-mile radius. Tracking dogs imported from Denver lost the scent on wet rocks. Air Force helicopters incessantly flew over canyons where echoes multiplied into sound phantoms. Divers explored glacial lakes with black waters that never revealed their secrets. The case gained national attention when Time magazine featured Julia's photo on the cover, smiling next to a sample of rose quartz. The missing rock girl became a symbol of a tragedy that touched the collective American heart. The image of curious childhood swallowed by the vast wilderness of the Colorado Rockies. Gradually, official searches diminished. Resources were reallocated. The wilderness reclaimed its territory, erasing footprints and whispers. Robert and Julia Mitchell became statistics, 2 more names on the dark list of the disappeared in America's most challenging mountain terrain. But in the Native American communities of the region, a legend began to be born. Medicine men spoke of voices in the wind, of a child and a man who walked eternally among the clouds of the peaks, guardians of a secret the mountain was not ready to reveal. Dr. Marina Thompson never believed in coincidences. As leader of the scientific expedition from the National Institute for Environmental Research, she understood that the wilderness operates according to its own logic, where each discovery is preceded by an intricate chain of seemingly disconnected events. The discovery that would change everything began prosaically. Research on climate change in high-altitude ecosystems was documenting lichen species at extreme elevations when doctoral student Carlos Martinez from the University of Colorado literally stumbled upon the first trace. "It was a typical foggy morning," recalls Marina, adjusting her glasses while observing the topographic map that dominates the wall of her office in Denver. Carlos was collecting samples at 7,050 feet when he stepped on something that sounded hollow. He thought it was a rotten root, but when he cleared the vegetation, the object was an aluminum pot with the Coleman brand still visible, corroded but structurally intact. Inside, protected by decades of sedimentation, fragments of laminated paper revealed numbers, GPS coordinates written by hand with blue ballpoint pen. 39-704N, 106-96, 44W. The same coordinates from Robert Mitchell's last contact. Marina wasn't an expert in disappearance cases, but 13 years conducting research in the Rockies had sharpened her investigative instinct. She consulted FBI archives, cross-referenced historical meteorological data, studied geological reports of the region. A pattern began to emerge, not in the official documents, but in the blank spaces between them. The rock formation, toward which Robert and Julia walked in March 2012, wasn't on any official map. Satellite images from that time showed only a diffuse stain, probably due to cloud cover. But Marina discovered something the rescue teams had ignored. Seismic data collected by the U.S. Geological Survey indicated minimal tectonic activity in the region during the disappearance period. Micro-displacements, she explains, tracing lines on the map with a red pen. Nothing that would cause earthquakes, but enough to alter the configuration of caves and rock fissures. The hypothesis was scientifically plausible. Father and daughter could have found shelter in an unstable geological formation that subsequently collapsed, sealing them in a natural chamber. But Marina knew that hypotheses need evidence, and evidence requires exploration. The new expedition was approved in record time, a rare luxury in American academic bureaucracy. Besides the scientific team from the National Institute, the group included 2 speleologists from the Colorado Cave Survey, a rescue specialist from the Colorado State Patrol, and, at Marina's insistence, a Native American guide named Joseph Crow Feather, whose ancestral knowledge of the region would be crucial for navigating the secrets of the Rocky Mountains. Joseph, 54, belonged to the community that reported the first voices in the wind after the disappearance. During preparations in Leadville, he revealed a detail that wasn't in the official reports. In the months following Robert and Julia's disappearance, other Native Americans had found strange objects scattered through the wilderness: a compass, fragments of synthetic fabric, and most significantly, pages torn from a notebook with plant drawings. "My people know that the mountain sometimes hides things," said Joseph, his deep voice carrying the weight of generations of nature observation. "But they also know that when it's time to reveal, it reveals." The night before departure, Marina received an unexpected call from Susan Mitchell, Robert's widow and Julia's mother. The woman, now 58, worked as a geography teacher in Denver and kept alive the hope for closure to her family's disappearance. "I dream about her," confessed Susan, her choked voice traveling through the distorted phone line. "Julia appears in my dreams holding flowers I've never seen before. She always says the same thing: 'Mommy, we found the mountain's secret garden.'" Marina promised that regardless of what they found, Susan would be the first to know. But as she hung up the phone, a growing uneasiness took hold of her thoughts. 13 years was enough time for the wilderness to completely erase any human trace. What exactly did they expect to find at Robert and Julia Mitchell's lost campsite? In the early morning, while the Air Force helicopter prepared to take off toward the Rocky Mountains, Marina observed for the last time the lights of Denver disappearing on the horizon. She knew that stories like this rarely have happy endings, but carried with her the unwavering conviction that every truth, however painful, deserves to be discovered. The mountain waited, silent and patient, as it always had. The entrance was almost invisible, an irregular fissure in the rock wall, masked by curtains of ferns and alpine flowers that seemed to have grown there for centuries. If not for the precise indication of the GPS found in the pot, even Marina's experienced team would have walked right past it. "It looks like someone camouflaged it purposefully," observed Carlos Martinez, carefully separating the dense vegetation. His words echoed with premonitory strangeness, as if the wilderness itself had conspired to hide that access. Joseph approached the entrance with the reverence of one who recognizes a sacred place. His hands touched the rock with ancestral delicacy, and for a moment his eyes closed in concentration. When he opened them, his expression had changed. "This is where the voices began," he said simply. The interior revealed itself as a natural cathedral of surprising proportions. The fissure expanded into a cave of approximately 2,150 square feet, with an irregular ceiling rising up to 50 feet high. Stalactites and stalagmites created natural columns that divided the space into interconnected chambers, and a diffuse clarity filtered through invisible openings from the exterior. But what transformed that discovery into something extraordinary wasn't the geological formation. It was what Robert and Julia Mitchell had created there. The campsite wasn't just a temporary shelter. It was a laboratory, a museum, a secret garden built over years of voluntary isolation. Camping tents shared space with improvised structures made of branches and stones. Natural shelves on the rock walls displayed meticulously organized collections of minerals, dried plants, seeds, and hundreds of detailed drawings of species never catalogued by science. Marina moved through the space in reverent silence, her flashlight revealing layers of a life that had adapted to the most improbable conditions. An ingenious rainwater collection system used tarps and containers strategically arranged. Small gardens cultivated in soil, transported from outside, sheltered medicinal and food plants. An improvised library kept books on botany, geology, and survival, their pages protected in plastic bags. But it was the diaries that revealed the true dimension of the discovery. Robert had documented everything. His notes, written in increasingly shaky handwriting over the years, told a story of gradual transformation, of a 3-week expedition that extended indefinitely, of a father and daughter who discovered something so extraordinary they chose to remain hidden from the world. Day 127. Julia found today a species of orchid that doesn't exist in any classification. The petals change color according to air humidity. How do we explain this to the authorities? How do we make them understand that this cave is a unique natural laboratory on the planet? Day 2047. The world out there continues destroying the forest. Here, we protect secrets that could revolutionize world botany. Julia has grown, become a natural scientist. She says, "We are the guardians of this place." Day 4205. My health deteriorates, but Julia is strong. She learned everything I could teach and much more. If something happens to me, she knows what to do. The last entry, dated only 2 months earlier, was written in different handwriting, younger, firmer. Day 4751. Dad passed away yesterday in his sleep. I buried him in the Alpine Flower Garden, as he asked. I continue alone, but not lonely. The plants are my family now. Someone needs to protect this place until the world is ready to understand. Marina felt her legs weaken. Julia was alive. The 12-year-old girl had become a 25-year-old woman, a self-taught scientist alone, guarding the secrets of unique biodiversity. But where was she now? The answer came in the form of a subtle trail, recent footprints in the moist earth, directing toward a narrow passage at the back of the main cave. The team followed cautiously, their flashlights illuminating walls adorned with modern cave paintings, detailed representations of plants and animals executed with natural pigments. The passage opened into a second chamber, smaller but equally impressive, And there, kneeling beside an impossible hanging garden, was she. Julia Mitchell had become a creature of the wilderness. Her brown hair fell to her waist, intertwined with small flowers. Her skin, bronzed by sun, filtered through rock openings, was decorated with geometric Native American paintings. She wore clothes woven with plant fibers, and her hands, delicate but calloused, held with extreme care a seedling of a plant never seen by science. When she noticed the visitor's presence, she showed no fright or surprise. Her eyes, the same brown eyes that Martha remembered from a curious girl buying supplies, met Marina's with disturbing serenity. "I knew you would come," she said with a soft voice, but loaded with authority. "The mountain warned me, but you arrived too early." Marina approached slowly, as if facing a wild animal that might flee at any sudden movement. "Julia, I'm Marina, from the National Institute. Your mother has been looking for you for 13 years. Julia's smile carried ancient sadness, but also a peace that seemed impossible after so much isolation. "I know. I feel her in my dreams. But you don't understand. This place isn't just a cave. It's a portal, a laboratory of nature itself, where species evolve in accelerated ways. What we discovered here can change human understanding about life on Earth." She gestured toward the hanging garden, where dozens of unknown plants grew in impossible symbiosis, their colors and forms defying any known botanical classification. "My father died, protecting this secret. I continued his work. But the world out there—" Julia paused, her eyes reflecting premature wisdom. "The world still isn't ready. Humanity would destroy this place in the name of science or profit." Marina understood she faced an unprecedented ethical dilemma. Julia was technically free. She hadn't been kidnapped or held against her will. She had chosen, consciously, to remain as guardian of a discovery that could revolutionize science. But she was also a person the world considered dead, whose mother had been mourning for over a decade. "What if there was a way to protect this place and reunite you with your family?" asked Marina. Julia's gaze hardened slightly. "Can you guarantee that this secret garden will remain untouched? That no corporation, no government, no commercial interest will ever desecrate what we built here?" It was a question for which Marina had no answer. And in the silent cave, surrounded by wonders that defied human comprehension, she understood that some discoveries are too big to be revealed all at once. The meeting at the Department of Interior headquarters in Washington happened on a typical August morning in the capital. Open sky, humid air, a clarity that contrasted dramatically with the green twilight of the Rocky Mountains. Around the oval mahogany table, representatives of institutions that rarely dialogued tried to build a solution for an unprecedented problem. Marina observed the tense faces: the director of the National Institute, the Attorney General, the representative from the Department of Environmental Protection, two anthropologists specializing in Native American rights, and Susan Mitchell, who held with trembling hands a cup of already cold coffee. 3 months had passed since the discovery, and the secret weighed on everyone involved like a responsibility too great for any individual decision. "What you're asking me," said Susan, her voice controlled but fragile, "is to accept that my daughter chose to remain dead to the world." Marina leaned forward. During the weeks following the first contact, she had returned to the cave 5 times, always accompanied only by Joseph. Each visit deepened her understanding of the situation's complexity and her admiration for the woman Julia had become. "Susan, I saw your daughter. She's not just alive. She's fulfilled. She developed knowledge about high-altitude biodiversity that surpasses any world expert. The species she catalogued and protects in that cave, some may contain keys to new medicines, new ways of understanding evolution." "But she's my daughter!" Susan exploded, allowing the contained emotion to finally emerge. "She was 12 years old when she disappeared. How can I accept that a child made a decision that would separate her from me forever?" The silence that followed was filled only by the hum of air conditioning and the distant noise of Washington traffic. Joseph, who had been invited as a cultural consultant, spoke for the first time since the meeting began. "In my people's culture," he said, his deep voice carrying the weight of generations, "there are people chosen by the wilderness to be bridges between worlds. Shamans, guardians, protectors of sacred secrets. The girl, she became that, not by abandoning family, but by love for something greater." The Attorney General, a pragmatic woman accustomed to dealing with legal complexities, intervened. "From a legal standpoint, Julia Mitchell is a capable adult. If she chooses to remain in that location, we have limitations to interfere. But there's the documentation issue. Officially, she hasn't existed for 13 years. It was then that Marina presented the proposal she had matured during her visits to the cave. What if we created a precedent? A model of environmental protection that recognizes voluntary human guardians. Julia doesn't need to return in the traditional sense, but can be officially recognized as a resident researcher of a special scientific protection area. The idea was audacious. Establish the cave and a surrounding area of 20 square miles as an ultra-restricted access scientific reserve, with Julia officially designated as researcher guardian. She would maintain regular contact with the outside world through satellite communication, document her discoveries for the scientific community, but remain physically in the location she had chosen as home. Susan remained silent for long minutes, processing the proposal. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a mixture of pain and maternal understanding. "Can I talk to her? Can I see her?" Marina nodded. "She specifically asked for you to come. She said there are things she needs to explain personally." The reunion happened in the hanging garden of the second chamber, under the golden light that filtered through the rock openings. Susan descended by climbing rope with clumsy but determined movements, her legs trembling not from physical effort, but from approaching a moment she had imagined thousands of times. Julia waited kneeling beside a natural spring, her hands occupied with planting microscopic seedlings. When she heard her mother's steps, she rose slowly, and for an instant the two women simply observed each other across the distance of 13 years. Susan saw a stranger, tall, elegant, with the confident posture of someone who deeply knows their place in the world, but the eyes were the same, and when Julia smiled, it was as if time compressed into a fraction of a second. "Mom," she said simply. The embrace lasted several minutes, loaded with tears, whispers, and the silent weight of an absence that had shaped two lives in completely different ways. "Why, daughter? Why didn't you come home?" Julia led her mother through the hanging garden, showing plants that seemed from a fairy tale, flowers that changed color according to touch, miniature trees that produced fruits with unknown medicinal properties, luminescent mosses that created natural constellations on the cave walls. "Because this is my home now," Julia replied, "and because someone needs to protect this." Dad understood, in the end. "He saw what I see, that this place is a laboratory of creation itself, where nature tests new forms of life. If the world discovers before it's ready—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Susan understood the dangers: commercial exploitation, predatory tourism, destruction disguised as scientific research. "But I missed you so much," confessed Susan. "And I missed you. Every night I talked to the stars about you, about how I wish you could see what we discovered, about how Dad said you would be proud of the scientist I became." For 3 days, mother and daughter lived together in the cave. Susan learned about Julia's routines, her research methods, her communication with the Native Americans of the region, who considered her a kind of wilderness shaman. She understood that her daughter hadn't fled from the world. She had found a vocation that transcended conventional society structures. On the morning of departure, Susan asked a question she had kept throughout the visit: "Are you happy?" Julia considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I am complete," she finally replied. There's a difference. Happiness comes and goes. Completeness is when you find your purpose in the universe. The ceremony creating the Rocky Mountains Special Scientific Reserve took place at the White House, with the presence of the President, cabinet members, and representatives from international environmental organizations. Susan watched from a chair in the front row, wearing a discreet pin with a photo of Julia at 12 years old. Via satellite, directly from the cave, Julia participated in the ceremony. Her image projected on the big screen showed a serene woman, wearing clothes woven with wilderness fibers, speaking with scientific authority about the importance of preserving unique ecosystems. This reserve represents a new conservation model, she said, her voice clear through the satellite connection. We don't preserve nature by keeping it untouched, but by understanding our role as conscious guardians. Here science and ancestral Native American wisdom work together to protect secrets that can benefit all humanity. After the ceremony, Susan received Julia's first official scientific report, a 347-page document detailing 23 completely new plant species with properties that could revolutionize medicine, agriculture, and understanding about accelerated evolution in isolated environments. That night, in her apartment in Denver, Susan turned on the computer and opened the satellite communication program that connected her directly to the cave. Julia's image appeared on the screen, illuminated by the soft light of luminescent mosses. "How was the day at the reserve?" asked Susan, establishing the routine of weekly conversations they had maintained since the reunion. "We discovered a fascinating symbiosis between two fungus species and an alpine flower," replied Julia, her eyes shining with discovery enthusiasm. "Tomorrow, I'm going to document everything to send to the National Institute." While they talked about plants, research, and small events of an extraordinary life's routine, Susan understood she had found a new way of being a mother. Not the mother who waits in the living room while her daughter returns from school, but the mother who celebrates from a distance the triumphs of a daughter who chose a unique path in the world. When the conversation ended and the screen darkened, Susan opened the desk drawer and took out the sketch notebook Julia had left at the first campsite, 13 years earlier. On the last page, she found a drawing she hadn't noticed before, a cave full of fantastic plants with two small figures in the center, a girl and a man holding hands, smiling. Below, in the careful handwriting of a 12-year-old child, was written, "The secret garden where we're going to be happy forever." Julia had found her secret garden, and in a way that transcended all conventional expectations of a happy ending, a family had reunited, not through physical proximity, but through deep understanding that true love sometimes means accepting choices we could never imagine. In the Rocky Mountains, a young woman continued her nightly vigil among plants that glowed in the dark, protecting secrets that could change the world. In Denver, a mother fell asleep in peace, knowing her daughter had found not just a vocation, but a purpose that honored both the scientific curiosity inherited from her father and the unconditional love learned at home. And in the Native American communities of the region, medicine men told a new legend about the plant woman who became guardian of the mountain's secrets, building bridges between ancestral knowledge and future wisdom. Some stories don't end with traditional family reunions. Some end with the understanding that love takes forms we could never predict, and that certain choices, however painful, carry within them a beauty that transcends all conventional expectations of a happy ending.